Okay guys, I'm cutting this steel up for this running board project, and instead of running an extension cord out to the saw, which I could easily do, I thought I'd test my little Honda that's been sitting all winter. I ran this dry when I parked it, and I thought that running it dry would be good enough, but apparently it wasn't good enough, because watch this. So when I manually introduce fuel into this carburetor, it'll run, and then when the fuel runs out, it dies. So I know I have spark and compression, because it runs as long as it has fuel, right? See that? As long as I get a gas or flammable object to burn, it's gonna run. And then when I take the fuel away from it, by letting it run out, in other words, it dies. Trying to choke in both positions, no improvement. So what does that mean, guys? We know we have fuel, we know we have spark, we know we have compression. I poured gas in it, it's in there, but it's not getting through the pilot jet to run. So unfortunately, I have to do what many of you have to do every spring because you didn't properly drain your stuff. I thought I did, but I guess I didn't. Got to do a carb clean. So this is how you do a Honda. This is how you do a carb clean on a Honda generator. Put the screws for all your air stuff. Keep it all together. Tell what's holding it down back there. Up, screw under here. Make sure you pull this breather. That'll expose another little screw in there. These are all at just 8mm. The screw to get your big red cover off is a flat blade. And once you get your big cover off, you got these 8mm that are all connected and related to the air cleaner in some way. Get this off. You got this little hose here. Pull that off, get it out of the way. There's a little spacer washer back here to protect the plastic when you torque it. Don't lose that. This looks like a vent tube that should be there, that isn't there. I probably robbed it off of there to put it on the dirt bike, would be my guess. You might need pliers for this if you don't have real strong fingers like I do. Push the tube in 1mm and then pull it out. Usually cracks them loose. They won't pull. Push it first, then pull it. It's a lot easier to break that rubber loose in compression. And this should just slide off like this. So yeah, that's a vent tube right there. We can deal with that later. This is a 10mm bolt for the float bolt. Try to do this without tearing that gasket, guys. See that gasket? That gasket cannot be torn. If you tear that all up, it won't run right. It really won't. I had a problem like that down at Coleman's in Woodbridge. Shop foreman down there thought he was God's gift to mechanics, and I told him that generator had a car air leak on it. He flat out refused to let me just order one of those gaskets. Said I didn't know what I was doing. Sent it to Mr. Two at the Falls Church store, and sure enough, boom, he put a gasket in there, fired right up. That's why he's still a shop foreman there, and I'm a service manager somewhere else. But okay guys, you don't let you get your air. Oh, look at that gunk. See that? That is my fault, guys. Look at that mess. Oh, goodness. I should be ashamed of that. I thought I drained all this gas out when I parked it. But obviously I did not. Look at that. I'm ashamed of that. I'm going to edit that out of the video. No, just kidding. So, I'm going to get these jets cleaned out. Get some plastic nozzles up there. Make sure all these ports are spraying properly. Get all this muck cleaned up. And get that junk out of those jets. And she'll fire up and run like a champ. I'm going to turn the camera off while I do all the cleaning. I cleaned the jets out, sprayed a nozzle up through the little holes in there. I got this hole, and this hole, and this hole. These are feeder holes going into the bowl. There's like 3 or 4 of them total. Make sure you get solvent flowing freely through there. I got a good gasket there I probably should replace, but I'm not gonna because it didn't tear. Okay, here's your factory emissions pilot screw adjuster. You shouldn't have to mess with that if everything's clean, but if you ever need to mess with it, there it is. One of the reasons these things are so quiet and fuel efficient is because they run on the bare minimum amount of gas required to do the job. So, put my fuel line back on. I'm going to take the vent hose and put the vent hose on to keep that clean as possible. Okay. Get this bolted back on. Make sure you got your protective washer on the back there. See that? You don't want to just crush that down and mash stuff. While I'm holding that with my finger, I'm going to put my hose back on that came off. My breather hose. Put that back there where it goes. Okay. Put it back where it goes in the engine for the valve cover. Okay. Got that pushed in on both holes all the way. Start this screw in. Make sure the protective washer's there again. Constantly making sure that hasn't fallen out. Don't torque anything, just put it on. Get the other two lined up before you tighten anything down. Get everything started. Leave them a little bit loose, just get them all in place. I like to give it the higgle jiggle there, just make sure everything's found home and seated properly. And then I tighten these first because they're manifold bolts. They actually seal air on that gasket up in the front. You could tighten that one, I wouldn't fault you for it, but I like to tighten these first because these are actually participating in an air seal. This one here, all it's doing is holding the airbox on the engine. It's just holding it on the frame. No big deal. All right, put the crankcase part back over that screw. That just keeps extra oil residue from mucking things up. And then, because the bowl is dry, I am going to introduce some fuel manually. That's just because the bowl is dry. Hopefully it'll pop and spit and sputter a few times without running, which means it's telling me it's filling the bowl. And then after it pops and spits and sputters a few times and I pull it 58,000 times, then it should run on its own now. As best I can tell, I got that carburetor clean. So I introduced a little bit of fuel in there. Hopefully it'll start and run on that and use that to pull gas through. We got plenty of brand new, fresh, clean gas in there. We got our little vent turned to the on position so it can breathe. Got our ignition on. So here we go. It should start, run till it runs out of fuel. I'll pull it a few more times and then it should start and run on its own. Okay guys, I think I figured out why my carb clean didn't fire up right away. There's another jet underneath of that screw right there. I'm going to try to hold this camera while I get this out. That's the idle portion. It's the idle set screw for the idle right there. See that? controls the idle. It's about 6 turns out. So I'm gonna set that there. And I'm gonna pry this little doodad out here. And make sure that that's all clean inside. See that little black sleeve there? Be very careful you don't tear it up. This also is a jet and needs to be spotlessly clean. And the port that it lives in needs to be spotlessly clean. I don't see any daylight through it. Alright, it's clean now. I'll lay it against this red rag. You can see better. See the side hole there? That side hole tees with a hole down on the bottom. And that was clogged up. So we're going to spray some solvent through that hole there. Hopefully we're cleaning up wherever it's going in the carburetor. Hopefully now, when we reassemble this, we'll get her fired up. Hey guys, I turned that adjuster screw till that plate in there on the throttle side was just cracked open. And I do mean just cracked open. And now I'm figuring out that the gaskets were double stacked in the front of the carburetor. Mr. 2 worked on this last in Virginia, and he had both of the gaskets in the front and none in the back, so no big deal. It was running like that, but I went ahead and swapped them around and put a good clean gasket on both sides of that. So, all right, go ahead and get this on and see if we can fire it up. Always checking your backspacer there and your PVC hose. Some of the newer ones of these have an actual EGR valve in there. This one's old enough, doesn't have that. I'm not sure how old this one is, but yeah, now that we got all the jets clean and all the gaskets in the right place and everything put back together the way Honda wants it to be, it might actually work. Wouldn't that be something? What's the rule here, guys? What's the moral of this story? Even though I thought I had drained my carburetor and had it all cleaned up just because I ran it till it died, all I did was turn the gas off, ran it till it died, and then poured it out here and put what was in there in my truck. Well, I didn't take the time to go back in here and drain the bowl, and I should have done that. I just ran it until it died. You know, in other words, I just ran it until the level of gasoline was low enough that it stalled out, but I didn't run it until the bowl was actually empty. So next year I'll drain it properly the way you're supposed to, and I bet that does wonders. Okay guys, we got this little Honda figured out, guys. The main thing is getting all of your pilot jets clogged and cleaned. We had the jet on the left side. I'll get the sunlight out of your face. We had the jet on the left side of the carburetor, right behind the idle screw adjuster, the black plastic tube that has cross T-holes in it. You got to pry that up and clean that. You got to clean the 2 spray holes in the back of the carburetor and the one coming up from the bowl and the nozzle. You get all those cleaned up, get everything working fine. Then when you start this thing up, there you go. We'll go ahead and choke it. Should fire right up now. There you go, guys. Now that it's running, you're gonna have all your fuel flowing, so now the governor can work. At first I suspected it was the top of the carburetor throttle actuator, because that's electronically controlled on these Hondas, but after I got it running I realized that wasn't it at all. It was just clogged jets. I cleaned 2 of the jets very, very well and missed one of them, just not knowing the product. And then once I figured out that extra jet was still clogged, now we're good to go. So the moral of the story, guys, do not leave gas in your generators at the end of the year. Don't just run them till they die. That's not enough. You actually have to go in and drain the bowls. Okay, peace out. Wear your helmets.